The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
That's a lot of people you tell
Political assassination. A popular American activist shot and killed at a college event. The latest in a string of violence towards political figures.
We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country.
A murder in North Carolina raising security concerns. The city officials and transit system now under fire as politicians play the blame game. And making America healthy again. The new urgency to change the country's healthcare system as officials provide a bleak overview. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us for this weekend edition. The suspect in the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk has been identified. This is 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of Utah. He was taken into custody after a nearly two-day manhunt. Officials say Robinson confessed or implied to a family member that he killed Kirk, and they turned him in.
I want to thank the family members of Tyler Robinson who did the right thing in this case and were able to bring him into to law enforcement.
The family told law enforcement Robinson had grown increasingly political and did not like Kirk's viewpoints. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says state officials will pursue the death penalty. Charlie Kirk spent his entire adult life as a political activist, becoming one of the most polarizing figures in modern politics. His work on behalf of the Republican Party is credited with helping President Trump get elected twice, and he has received praise for creating a shift among young voters towards the GOP. The National News Desk, Taylor Murray reports.
Charlie Kirk spent his entire adult life trying to rally young voters to the Republican Party.
His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever.
He prided himself on giving critics the opportunity to debate him.
Constitutional rights apply to everyone within the United States' jurisdiction.
To a limited extent. Will you admit that he was lying, or at least didn't come through on his promises?
No. I mean, He's trying to end the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Liberal New York Times columnist Ezra Klein writing, "You can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He was showing up to campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him." The New York Post front page Thursday quoting Kirk, who preached about having reasonable disagreements without resorting to violence. Some of his arguments were, no doubt, extremely polarizing during his life.
A man who calls himself trans is wearing woman face no different than I would wear blackface trying to be a black person.
I understand.
And after his death.
I'm not going to mince words. I genuinely found some of Charlie Kirk's views to be violent, abhorrent. No one, that doesn't mean you murder someone. I mean, it's horrific.
Exactly. But the results of his efforts were undeniable. He and his Turning Point USA organization were credited with contributing to a historic shift among young voters to the Republican Party last year. Analysis of the 2024 election revealed that voters aged 18 to 29 shifted to Trump by 12 percentage points compared to 2020. A result that Kirk explained to Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom earlier this year.
We believe Democrats were taking them for granted. We saw some of the fault lines there. And to President Trump's credit, he also harmonized with the strategy by going on podcasting and using TikTok. But yeah, I mean, we did it in 4 years.
As for his ultimate legacy, President Trump believes the assassination will make Kirk's voice bigger and grander than ever before. I'm Taylor Murray reporting.
The trial for the man accused of trying to assassinate President Trump in Florida began this week. Ryan Ruth is accused of trying to assassinate Trump last September. He's pleaded not guilty to 5 charges and is representing himself. Many of the jurors have admitted they knew about the case from the news, but said they could still be objective. The Speaker of the House says officials on Capitol Hill are expediting a planned review of member security after the deadly shooting of political activist Charlie Kirk. Both Republican and Democratic House leaders announced a pilot program to increase funding for security for members and their families.
We're in a deliberate review process right now to determine what measures are appropriate, how much we could allocate for that. We've got to protect people who run for public office, or no one will. And that's heavy on our hearts and minds as we also, work through the trauma of what happened yesterday.
U.S. Capitol Police say in a statement they can't provide specific details about their increased security posture. However, Johnson says providing 435 House members with a security detail would cost billions of dollars. Accused killer DeCarlos Brown reportedly told his family he killed 23-year-old Irina Zarutska because he thought she was reading his mind. That's according to a new CNN report. As national correspondent Kayla Gaskins explains, this murder on a North Carolina public transit train has captivated the nation as Republicans aim to tie it into their crime crackdowns.
Democrats have chosen to side with criminals.
North Carolina's Republican lawmakers gathering for a press conference Wednesday, blaming the city of Charlotte's Democratic leadership for the murder of Irina Zarutska on a public train last month.
This is, ladies and gentlemen, was 100% preventable.
Pointing out a magistrate had let the suspect, DeCarlos Brown Jr., out on cashless bail in January, even though he had an extensive violent criminal history and at least 14 prior arrests.
This is what happens when you have weak, incompetent, and feckless leadership.
Charlotte's mayor, Vi Lyles, won Tuesday's Democratic primary in her bid for re-election. Meanwhile, Brown's brother said the accused killer should not have been free to harm others, telling the New York Post, "You can't just let him walk free, especially because of mental issues. He could do it again. They should still treat him for his mental issues, but there are consequences for his actions. I think he should suffer the consequences." Brown's sister recorded a phone call she had with her brother after the murder where he blames materials in his body that were, quote, controlling him for killing Irina.
The material, put it like this, the material using my body to stab the lady. That's not me.
The federal government is going to save our city.
The Justice Department working to ensure that happens, bringing a federal case against Brown.
We have taken the case because it's murder on mass transit.
Attorney General Pam Bondi wary of leaving the prosecution entirely up to Charlotte's Democrat district attorney.
Progressive DAs cannot handle this case. Justice will be served. He'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
President Trump calling for a quick trial and the death penalty for Brown on Truth Social.
Here on Capitol Hill, Congress is considering the District of Columbia Cash Bail Reform Act, which would eliminate cashless bail for certain public safety crimes. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now. Taking a look over Chicago, where the president is now setting his sights with Operation Midway Blitz. ICE agents say so far they have arrested 3 men who are suspected gang members and are investigating possible gun trafficking by the Trinidad gang. The operation was announced earlier this week and is part of a 30-day federal immigration enforcement surge to get dangerous criminals off the streets of Chicago. The emergency declaration behind the federal takeover of Washington, D.C. expired Wednesday. According to the mayor's office, Trump can't control the city's police force more than 30 days without Congress. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine saying some out-of-state National Guardsmen will remain in the Capitol through November at the request of the Trump administration. Some D.C. residents say they don't want Trump to be so involved in their city. Police say homicides, car thefts, robberies, and violent crime are down since the takeover. Part of the Trump administration's plan to make America healthy again was unveiled this week. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says action is needed because the U.S. is metaphorically and literally in critical condition.
We are now the sickest country in the world. We announced this week, CDC announced, that 76.4% of Americans are suffering a chronic disease.
The report is close to a draft document that was circulated last month. Some of the plans outlined include creating a clear definition of ultra-processed food, investigating vaccine injuries, and studying the effects of exposure to pesticides. For the first time in history, more school-age children and adolescents are obese rather than underweight. A new UNICEF report found obesity exceeds underweight in all regions of the world except sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. The highest obesity rates are in some Pacific Island nations, Chile, the United States, and the United Arab Emirates. There's a push to get House Speaker Mike Johnson to extend expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits before the end of the year. The Hill reports Democrats could demand an extension for the credits in exchange for a vote to keep the government from shutting down.
Even at this moment, at this day, at this hour, healthcare is under attack by Republicans and Donald Trump. We can't stand for that. We're not going to take that.
And as we get closer to the funding deadline, though, we recognize the shutdown chatter from the left is growing louder. Some of these people seem to enjoy this. It seems Democrats may take the path of maximum resistance.
The GOP spent more than a decade trying to roll back the ACA. Some Democrats do not support bailing out Republicans on the issue, believing it helps the GOP ahead of next year's midterms. Still to come, the impact of Charlie Kirk's faith on the nation. Hear from a pastor and close friend of Kirk coming up next. And the federal crackdown taking hundreds of thousands of illegal vapes off the streets. We'll be right back. Charlie Kirk believed in the powerful connection between freedom and faith, which is why he also created Turning Point USA. He wanted to empower the church to stand firm on the biblical principles of which the country was founded. This week, Jan Jeffcoat sat down with pastor and close friend of Kirk, Craig Dyson, to discuss his impact.
You know, you understood his mission. What do you want others to know about Charlie and his legacy?
Well, on an incredible day like today, 9/11, we all remember where we were on that day. And the incident yesterday, the death, the murder of Charlie Kirk is another one of those moments I will never forget where I was on that day. We're hearing all the stories of what it's being called, and we're hearing the term political assassination. And I understand why. So much of the impact of what Charlie did with his life had impact in politics, but I want to say that first and foremost, like, Charlie's passion was his relationship with Jesus Christ. That was the first thing. And if he were to tell you the second thing, it would be his wife and his children. And other than that, he loved his country. And so I want to make sure that people understand that what Charlie did with his life was not because he enjoyed politics. It wasn't because he had a lean to a particular party or wanted to build a brand for himself. He did what he did because he had a passion for Jesus Christ. He was inspired by the Word of God. He encountered Jesus Christ in his own life, and he wanted to give himself in life and now also in death, and making sure that people understood that truth matters and that truth has a source. And so his faith was number one in absolutely everything he did.
And you know, Craig, so many pastors and faith leaders have come out and said the same thing, and they've talked about the profound influence Charlie had on their ministry. How did he impact you personally, especially during COVID when churches were ordered to shut down?
And what a time in history. Every time Charlie would meet with TPUSA Faith and the pastors and the churches that were a part of it, he would always start off by saying, in 2020, I made the worst prediction in the history of podcast, that when the government tried to shut down the church, he predicted that the church would rise up and would say no to the tyranny of the government and would remain essential and do what they were supposed to do. But that didn't happen. And I think that spurred passion in Charlie to say, hey, we've got to not just go to the campuses and raise up students and get involved in politics, but we need to make sure that the church is being who the church is supposed to be. For me personally, I've come to the realization, so many people have, I've heard others say this too, Charlie's death was not simply a political assassination. He's a Christian martyr. He wasn't killed because of his politics. He was killed because of his faith. And if we see it that way, we will understand the heart behind where Charlie's passion came from. Charlie started to speak up in a time where so many churches and pastors over time had grown comfortable. They were busy creating these seeker-friendly movements. And Charlie gave his life. Ultimately, he gave his life for what he believed in. He risked everything to speak truth. He risked absolutely everything so that people who found themselves confused and hurt by the lies of what we see happening in the wokeism of this world. There's so many pastors and churches that won't do that very thing because they're afraid of losing tithes or they're afraid of losing people in their congregation. But Charlie wasn't afraid to lose his life. He would very courageously talk about the stats of what was coming against this generation. Coming out of 2020, we saw the stats that we had never seen before of the rise of suicide, depression, anxiety, drug addiction, alcoholism, abuse that this generation was facing. And he knew that it was, if no one else was going to do it, he was going to do it. And he wanted to go to every single college campus. And it doesn't get talked about a lot, but there are also tons and tons of high school chapters of Turning Point that have been started all around the country. He wanted to make sure that these young people knew that they had purpose, that they were loved. And it wasn't just because of people trying to be good people and live a good life. It was because they were the God that created them with a specific identity in place, a specific purpose. And everything that we see happening in liberalism and progressivism and in the secularism is trying to steal the identity that God has put in people, trying to make young men say that they are actually young women and young women are actually young men. All these things that are coming to steal, kill, and destroy the identity that God has put in a generation.
Which is so.
And Charlie was so passionate about this.
Yeah, and which is so biblical, and I can see how passionate you are, and I know that you will carry on his legacy along with millions of others across the country. All right, lead pastor at Convo Church, Pastor Craig Dyson, we appreciate your time with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Federal agents seized hundreds of thousands of illegal vapes during a raid of vape retailers and distributors across 6 states this week. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the seized products were being targeted to members of the military as well as children due to their bright colors and the sweet flavors. The retail value is over $14 million.
Parents, talk to your children. These things seized right here today. Watermelon ice. Targeting a child? Also an American flag on it. Don't let the American flag fool you. It's Chinese.
Bondi says illegal vaping products are usually smuggled through China. They contain high levels of nicotine as well as metals and chemicals that fail to meet the FDA's safety standards. President Trump says future wars will be fought from space, and he's already making moves to prepare America's defense. Trump recently announced that U.S. Space Command will move to Huntsville, Alabama. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So speak to us about the strategic significance of all of this in Trump's plans for the military.
Yeah, so it's clear that this is really one of Trump's main top defense priorities, space that is. He created the Space Force in his first term, and now he's kickstarted a $175 billion Golden Dome missile defense initiative to put weapons and interceptors in space. So moving Space Command to Huntsville, Alabama puts it right next to the Army's Space and Missile Defense Command, also NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. So it's clear that the investment and the effort is there.
Yeah, not entirely a surprise when you look at, some of his recent moves. Trump also, he claimed that the U.S. was losing the race in space to China and Russia. You dug into it. Any truth to that?
Definitely not just rhetoric. I mean, both China and Russia have tested anti-satellite weapons and launched military satellites that can get pretty close to U.S. assets. Also, Space Command's job is really to watch those threats 24/7, and now it's going to do that from Huntsville with about 1,400 jobs moving over there over the next 5 years. So it's clear that they're making sure, every T is crossed and I is dotted when it comes to our defense, whether it's here or in space.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all takes shape. Emma, thank you. A little later on, Emma will join us to break down the inner workings of the U.S. Space Command. Coming up next, why more people are choosing RVs as a permanent place to live. Then, the dramatic decline we're seeing in honeybees that are critical for food production. We're back in 90 seconds. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Nevada, where people can now explore Las Vegas in robo-taxis.
Talking to the owners.
Press to start ride.
And that's it.
4 seats, individualized temperature controls, wireless charging, and more. Zoox is an autonomous vehicle that Chief Product Officer Michael White says is an experience the company is excited to share with Las Vegas.
It's a city about innovation, and this is innovation. This is AIs, we hear 15 times a day, right? But AIs in service of us. We're traveling, the AI is doing the work, and we can get time back.
So far, there are 50 Zoox vehicles across Las Vegas and San Francisco.
The fruit we eat and the flowers we enjoy are possible thanks to honeybees.
And honeybees overall pollinate about 40% of the food. Go and say hi to the bees.
For longtime beekeeper Quentin Giant, hanging with honeybees is sweet.
Being with the bees, honestly, it's awesome.
But lately, the buzz is being killed.
We are looking at over 60% colony losses nationally, which is a staggering high number. About 43% of Washington beekeepers lost their colonies.
There are several reasons why bees are vanishing. These include poor nutrition, parasites, pesticides, and pathogens.
The housing market is showing signs of weakening along with the labor market.
Fewer jobs leading to fewer homes. That is the concern for economics professor Kirk Soidemir, who says President Donald Trump's tariffs are making the cost of building homes stay high. Southern Nevada's more than 7,200 single-family homes on the market is up nearly 37% from a year ago. But with less buying, there is less building for those new homes. People are turning to more affordable alternatives like RVs.
Everyone has a preconceived notion that RVs are, just for camping, which they can be. They can be just for camping, but a lot of people these days are using them to live in.
After a down payment, what are we talking per month?
Something like this is actually going to cost roughly about $750 to $850 per month.
Coming up, a suspected war criminal now charged after more than a decade in the spotlight. And scientists observe a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon proving predictions made over half a century ago. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. A new study suggests a collision between 2 black holes has confirmed decades-old predictions by legendary physicists Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking. Harvard researchers have been told some federal research money is being restored following a court ruling that the Trump administration's withholding funds was illegal. And coffee prices are surging. Retail costs climbed more than 20% in August compared to 12 months prior, according to the Consumer Price Index. That's the biggest year-over-year leap for coffee since October 1997. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Wholesale prices dipped slightly in August. New government data shows the Producer Price Index dropped 0.1% for the month after a revised 0.7% uptick in July. Wednesday's report should give the Federal Reserve some room to breathe for a possible interest rate cut this month. The International Criminal Court has opened a case against Joseph Kony, the Ugandan rebel leader who was thrust into the global spotlight in 2012 after a viral video about his crimes. He faces 39 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity as the fugitive leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, which terrorized northern Uganda for decades. There's a $5 million reward for his capture. Still to come, the Supreme Court hands the Trump administration a major victory in their immigration enforcement efforts. How the ruling could impact cities nationwide. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The president did not write this letter, he did not sign this letter, and that's why the president's external legal team is aggressively pursuing litigation against the Wall Street Journal, and they will continue to.
The White House continuing to distance itself from Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book, what the president is now saying about a letter with his alleged signature, and how lower than expected job numbers could bring about the rate cuts the president is calling for. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for being here with us. And President Trump speaking to reporters in Washington, D.C. about a letter inside Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book that allegedly has his signature.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. And anybody that's covered me for a long time knows that's not my language. It's nonsense.
Trump's comments come as lawmakers continue to push for transparency in the case. The National News Desk, Matt Gelka, has new details.
A 2003 birthday book compiled for Jeffrey Epstein contains messages, pictures, and notes from friends and family of the accused underage sex trafficker. The most notable part of the book is an alleged letter from Donald Trump accompanied by a lewd drawing of a woman. The note ends with "Happy birthday," and "May every day be another wonderful secret." The president has called the note fake, and the White House doubled down Tuesday.
We have maintained that position all along. The president did not write this letter. He did not sign this letter.
It's divided into sections, including family and friends, with redacted sections from girlfriends and children. Other parts of the book have references to Epstein and young women. There's also an apparent handwritten note from former President Bill Clinton. Republicans have backed the White House's claim that Trump didn't make the drawing or write the note to Epstein.
None of the victims nor their attorneys were saying anything about, oh, look up this birthday card to see if it's legit or not. The president says it's not. I take the president's word.
Clearly, the birthday note from President Trump is a fallacy. It's just not true. And that's a leftist talking point.
Most of the people in the book, including the president, have not been accused of legal wrongdoing related to Epstein. Democrats are using the Trump references, including another entry in the book from an Epstein friend with a picture of Epstein holding a novelty check from Trump suggesting a woman was sold, to continue to tie the president to the scandal, while pushing for a full release of all Epstein files.
If Republicans don't want to engage in a cover-up of pedophilia and this pedophilia ring, they should go sign this discharge petition. A handful of Republicans is all we need. Democrats are all on board.
Trump sued the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion earlier this summer over a report on the birthday note to Epstein. His supporters claim that the signature in the picture doesn't match his. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
A Princeton University doctoral student kidnapped by Iran-backed militia Kataib Hezbollah in 2023 in Iraq has been freed. Elizabeth Surkov was turned over to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad following more than 900 days in captivity. She holds both Israeli and Russian citizenship and entered Iraq using her Russian passport to do academic research. It's not clear what the circumstances were leading to her release. The Supreme Court sided with President Trump in his push to let immigration officials continue what critics describe as roving patrols in Southern California. Lower courts previously said the operations likely violated the Fourth Amendment. The case involved masked and heavily armed immigration and customs enforcement agents reportedly pulling aside people who identify as Latino, including some U.S. citizens. Lower courts found ICE likely hadn't established the required reasonable suspicion to justify the stops, but the Supreme Court disagreed. The White House in a tough spot following last week's bleak August jobs report. Senior Trump administration officials defending President Trump's economic record, despite figures showing the labor market slowing and a loss in manufacturing jobs. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent argues the bad numbers show lower interest rates could help boost growth.
If, in fact, these numbers are true, it shows that President Trump was right about the Federal Reserve. They are too late, and because of the bad numbers, they likely would have been cutting in June.
Trump has been touting his tariffs as major revenue generators, even as economists warn the taxes are slowing growth. And after that jobs report, investors are feeling better about a possible interest rate cut. Stocks improved this week after last week's losses. Treasury yields have also fallen 4% as investors assess the latest inflation data. This as the White House maintains the importance of the Federal Reserve's independence from political considerations.
Monetary policy, Federal Reserve monetary policy, needs to be fully independent of political influence,
including from President Trump.
Including from President Trump.
And that's President Trump's economic advisor, Kevin Hassett. He's on the president's shortlist to replace Fed Chair Jerome Powell once his term ends. Trump is trying to gain more influence over Fed governors, attempting to fire one. The nation's report card is out, and American high school seniors just posted their worst scores in years. The National News Desk, Angelo Brown reports.
The numbers are troubling. Reading skills hitting a new low for high school seniors. In 2024, the average reading score 3 points lower than in 2019 and 10 points lower than back in 1992. Think about that.
They first administered this test in 1992. Okay? And the high school seniors have the worst reading scores since 1992, which means these are the worst results on record ever.
And here's what it looks like for math. 45% of students not even showing basic skills. The failures are not being felt evenly either. Critics say the very students' equity initiatives were designed to help are not working. Erica Sanzi from Defending Education says students who were behind before are now in free fall.
Low-performing Black students were already way behind in 1992, okay? They are now 1.5 years behind where they were in 1992.
The results sparking outrage. Erica Donald's America First Policy Institute Chair Education Opportunity demanding action.
It's been 5 years since the pandemic, and it's time that we start holding people accountable for the lack of performance and lack of catching up despite billions of dollars being pumped into the education system. The system is failing our children, it's failing our families, and it's failing our country.
So what's behind the drop? Experts point to a number of reasons: cultural and classroom shifts, to increase screen time, to reliance on short, simplified texts, for example, in English classes. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
It is taking longer than ever for natural disaster survivors to get aid from the federal government. That's according to an Associated Press analysis of decades of data. The report says in the 90s and early 2000s, it took less than 2 weeks for a governor's request for a presidential disaster declaration to be granted. It rose to 3 weeks during the past decade, and under President Trump, it now takes more than a month. A White House spokesperson says it's because Trump thoroughly reviews the requests, so they're spent wisely. Can President Trump run for a third term? On ABC's The View, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, now the second justice to respond to the matter, saying it is settled law, but no one has ever challenged the 22nd Amendment. Meantime, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett was asked about the constitutional amendment preventing such a scenario.
And the 22nd Amendment says you can only run for office for 2 terms.
True.
You think that that's cut and dry?
Well, that's what the amendment says, right? After FDR had 4 terms, that's what that amendment says.
Her answer came in terms of what she says is the concrete nature of some of the amendments in the U.S. Constitution. Last month, the president said he probably wouldn't seek a third term, but would like to run. The Missouri House voted to approve a new U.S. House congressional map, giving Republicans an additional seat. The plan now heads to the state Senate, where it's expected to pass and be in place for the 2026 midterm elections. Dozens of residents testified against the proposed changes during a public hearing. Missouri, now the third state to move forward with redistricting plans. New details: most Americans' household income gains from last year were wiped out by inflation. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau, which notes incomes remain flat otherwise. The wealthiest 10% of households saw incomes rise. Black Americans were the hardest hit, with households experiencing a more than 3% decline in median income. Overall, median income is mostly unchanged from the 2019 2019 level when taking inflation into account. Microsoft employees will no longer be able to question senior executives on hot-button issues through an internal communication channel or enter certain buildings on its Washington state campus. The Wall Street Journal notes that this comes after an incident last month where workers stormed the office of a top executive and hung banners protesting the company's contract with the Israeli government. The company is also requiring all employees to report to the office 3 days a week starting in February. A Michigan judge has dismissed criminal charges against a group of people accused of trying to falsely certify President Donald Trump as the winner of the 2020 election. Investigators said the 15 Republicans signed a document falsely stating they were the state's duly elected and qualified electors. The judge found the state failed to prove they were knowingly trying to break the law. She also said the defendants seriously believed there were problems with the election.
This is not for the court to decide whether that was true or false, but this was their belief, and their actions were prompted by this belief.
Michigan's Democratic Attorney General called the ruling disappointing, arguing the members of the group knew their actions did not follow proper election procedure. Each member had faced charges of forgery and conspiracy to commit election forgery. We've been hearing a lot about space becoming the next battlefield, but what does that actually mean? Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. I know you dug into this, Emma. Let's start with walking us through the evolution of U.S. Space Command.
Yeah, so interesting history here. So U.S. Space Command, also called U.S. Spacecom, is the military command in charge of all American operations in space. So it was originally created back in the 1980s, but then they shut it down after 9/11 happened when they needed to reallocate those resources to fight counterterrorism. And also as China and Russia, though, started developing satellite disrupting weapons on their end, the Pentagon decided that we needed to bring Spacecom back online, and now that's where we are today.
And it's not just about launching rockets and spy satellites. I mean, this is a very detailed mission.
Definitely. Their job is to make sure our GPS communications and missile warning satellites stay up and running. So even if an adversary tries to take them out, they'll have them back online. That means tracking over 40,000 objects in orbit, also planning how to respond if a rival nation targets one of our assets. So it's pretty complex and definitely sounds necessary.
And critical. Yep. Emma, thank you
Thanks
so much. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to Emma's sources, scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the Trump administration's crackdown on crime to NATO's reaction over Russian drones invading Polish airspace.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The federal takeover of Washington, D.C.'s police department expired this past week, but the city's mayor says she'll continue to cooperate with the federal government. National correspondent Matt Galka, her response runs counter to other Democratic leaders who have been faced with potential federal intervention in their cities.
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, Democratic leaders around the country, think of people like California Governor Gavin Newsom or Governor Pritzker in Illinois, largely and vocally opposed to any federal intervention in their states and their cities. But D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a little different story. Now, maybe it's because the feds have a lot more power in the city of Washington, D.C. I mean, they have a lot more things they can do unilaterally, and this D.C. takeover is one example. President Trump was able to deploy federal law enforcement and the National Guard, essentially take over law enforcement in the city under an emergency order for 30 days. And Congress could have voted to extend that. They didn't. And part of that was because of the cooperation that they are getting from the city of Washington, D.C. and the local leaders there. Now, look at the numbers. In the period between August 7th and September 9th, right around the time that the takeover was ending, arrests were up, around 2,700 arrests during that time, compared to 2,500 arrests in the 34-day period before the federal takeover. Crime was down. Violent crime was down 17%. Property crimes were down 10%. And again, that emergency takeover expired. Congress did not opt to extend it. But DC's mayor says, well, the feds aren't going away just yet. There's still going to be some cooperation.
Federal police officers can enhance the public safety mission of MPD. So federal police officers will be in the district. Any other officers that the federal government uses could be in the district, but not with MPD.
Any other officers, she's alluding to ICE and cooperation between the police department and ICE. So she's saying that they will not be cooperating going forward, but they had been during this takeover period. Now, the Trump administration seems fine with letting this emergency lapse, and partly because Congress is doing more to sort of chip away at DC's home rule authority. This past week, they did move along a group of bills that gave more power to the federal government and less power to the local DC city officials. Things like making the city's attorney general appointed by the president instead of being voted on. They also moved the bill that would have harsher penalties for homeless people living in encampments. And they also made it easier for young people to be tried as adults. And they also moved a bill that would affect cashless bail in the city. So they are doing things that would give them more power over the city, even if they are not extending that emergency takeover.
National correspondent Matt Galka, thank you. Meanwhile, NATO forces struck down Russian drones in Polish airspace this past week. The European Union calling the incursion a, quote, reckless and unprecedented violation. National correspondent Atra Elnishar, why do Polish leaders believe it was no accident that Russia flew its drones over their country?
Yeah, this really was remarkable, Steve. This occurred overnight Tuesday, and it marked the first time in NATO's history that alliance fighters engaged with an enemy target in NATO airspace. Russian drones violated Polish airspace at least 19 times in just 7 hours. And at the time, Steve, Russia was launching hundreds of drone attacks on Ukraine, and Russia's military says it had no planned Polish targets, so not an outright denial. Take a listen to Poland's Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister.
In all likelihood, we're facing a large-scale provocation.
There were 19 breaches, and it simply defies imagination that could be accidental.
Right, so there's been, here and there throughout Russia's war in Ukraine, some incursions into Polish airspace, but 19 in 7 hours. Again, like the Deputy Prime Minister said, it defies imagination that this would happen by accident. So what Poland did was they formally invoked NATO's Article 4. Now, what this does is it calls allies to consult together whenever territorial integrity is threatened. Now, back here in Washington, President Trump's played a limited role, at least publicly, in this entire situation. He put out one social media post in the days after that did not even condemn Russia. It just said something along the lines of, what's with Russia violating Poland's airspace? But many, including some Republicans on Capitol Hill, think Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, renewing calls for Trump to finally make good on his threats to punish Russia with tougher economic measures, including sanctions on countries buying Russian oil.
National correspondents Atra Elnishar, Matt Galka, excellent reporting as always. Thank you both for your hard work. Back to you.
This year's hurricane season has been quiet. The season's peak will pass this week with no active storms for the first time in nearly a decade. There's traditionally been an active storm or hurricane in the Atlantic for the majority of the 76 years NOAA has tracked. Forecasts suggest the Atlantic will remain quiet into next week. If that happens, it would be the farthest into September the Atlantic has gone without a named storm forming since 1992. Researchers have published the first full brain map showing how decisions are made. According to a study published last week in the journal Nature, researchers gathered data from over 100 mice. During the 7-year study, researchers recorded brain signals as the mice responded to visual cues and earned rewards. They found decision making isn't limited to a few regions, but sparks activity across almost the entire brain. The mortality rate in the U.S. returned to pre-COVID-19 levels in 2024. The CDC reporting more than 3 million Americans died last year. COVID-19 fell out of the top 10 leading causes, but heart disease and cancer remain at the top. Drug overdoses and unintentional injuries were the third. Suicide was ranked the 10th leading cause. Coming up, Florida residents react as the state does away with its vaccine mandates for children. Then a sheriff under fire for divisive comments made on social media. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we start in Florida, where people are criticizing the state's plan to end childhood vaccine mandates.
All states, including Florida, have vaccination requirements for school children for hepatitis B, measles, mumps, polio, and chickenpox. Less than a week ago, Florida Surgeon General said the state should end those mandates.
Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body?
But not everyone is on board.
And to me, this is a reckless and dangerous policy, putting everyone at risk.
At a roundtable discussion Monday in West Palm Beach, U.S. Representative Lois Frankel said the idea that Florida would end the vaccine mandate for school children is unwise. Others at the roundtable echoed that view.
It would be a total disaster.
A new chapter for Hasbro, moving its corporate headquarters out of Rhode Island. The toy company announcing Monday it will move 700 full-time employees to its new office building in Boston Seaport by the end of 2026. The new HQ building is owned by WS Development, the same company that runs Garden City and the crossings in Smithfield.
We welcome Hasbro, we welcome the 700 jobs, and we welcome the creativity and the ingenuity.
But in Pawtucket, people are anything but playful about the decision.
First we lose the McCoy Stadium, now we lose Hasbro. We got nothing in Pawtucket no more.
Candid and unapologetic, as Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank sees nothing wrong with the recent post on his X account that read, "Do you think it's time to ban trans people from owning guns?"
The comments on trans people, do you think that people find those offensive, and was that intended?
I don't know if they should find it offensive or not. It was a question. I put out a question, said, should they be banned?
Swank brought up the recent school shooting in Minneapolis involving a transgender woman and added,
being transgender is a mental health issue.
Data shows mass shootings by transgender people are extremely rare. And now the sheriff finds himself under investigation by the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, which has the power to revoke his ability to work as a law enforcement officer.
Still ahead, Cracker Barrel changes plans following backlash, and a NASA rover makes a discovery that could answer the question humans have been wondering for centuries. NASA says its Mars rover uncovered rocks in a dry river channel that could hold potential signs of ancient microscopic life. On Earth, such minerals are typically associated with organic matter. More analysis is necessary, and the samples are being brought back to Earth for testing. But it's the most compelling evidence yet that there may have been life long ago. After a failed logo redesign, Cracker Barrel is also suspending restaurant renovations. The chain said the rocking chairs, fireplaces, and gift shops won't be removed from any more restaurants. The renovation was only tested at 4 of its 660 locations. The company launched a $700 million transformation that includes a menu redesign. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, we hope you have a great week.